Scholastic Audio presents Winterkill by Marsha Forchuk Skrypuch, read by Michael Gallagher. Comrade Tupolev broke through the crowd and sprinted over to the tractor. The driver stepped off, and Tupolev climbed up. Perching himself on the driver's seat, he looked down at us. "The Soviet Union is the only country in the world that manufactures modern farm equipment like this tractor. Our modern equipment will make it possible to transform small farms into food factories. There will be more grain for everyone." Slavko wormed his way forward, and before I knew it, he had his hands on the tractor with such gentleness and respect that you'd think he was scratching the ear of one of our farm animals. Next, Yulia was beside him, and other kids crowded around too, fighting among one another to touch the tractor, to get a closer look. I stepped closer, but as I did, the crowd surged. Someone's hands pushed on my back, and I ended up right against the tractor. I grabbed onto it so I wouldn't get crushed. And that's when I noticed a small metal crest with something written on it. It was affixed to the body of the machine at the back. The letters were not in Cyrillic, so it wasn't written in Ukrainian or Russian. The letters looked English, like on Alice's pin, or the packages Roman got from America. I didn't know what the letters meant. Why would a tractor made in the Soviet Union have a label in English on it? Comrade Tupolev continued with his speech. "No other farmers in the world have tractors. Only Soviet farmers have tractors," he shouted. My neck got hot with anger as I listened to his words. If he was going to lie to us, couldn't he at least make himself more convincing? Did he think that anyone in this crowd would believe a Soviet tractor would be labeled with English letters? Why was he lying? Tupolev paused to catch his breath. He looked around at his audience, then glared at two women who were whispering to each other. One of the women paled when she noticed his gaze. She elbowed her friend, and they both fell silent. Tupolev continued. "We have to watch out for traitors, those who want to stop our progress, selfish kulaks who only care for themselves." He paused again, then lifted his arms high in the air. Suddenly, the church bells rang out. Comrade Tupolev pointed to the church, and I turned to look. "Who is interrupting my speech by ringing church bells?" he roared. "We have saboteurs, kulaks, enemies of the people. We must fight them. Down with the church! Down with religion!" Chaos broke loose all around. People from the city who 1 moment ago had been standing quietly, listening, unbuttoned their winter coats and took out banners, mallets, and nails. They ran through the village square and swiftly nailed the banners to every wall and post that they could find. The banners had slogans like "Down with the Church" and "Long live the kolkhozes." Watching their orchestrated actions was like watching a play. "Get the priest!" shouted Tupolev. "He's behind all this." A soldier ran to the priest's house and kicked down the door. Moments later, he came out dragging Matushka, our priest's wife, by the black kerchief that usually covered her hair, only now it was around her neck like a noose. She gagged and choked with each step as he dragged her. "You're a traitor, a kulak!" shouted the soldier. He drew his gun and shot her in the chest. I stood and watched in frozen horror as blood blossomed on her chest and she went limp. The soldier strode back into the house. Another gunshot. I wanted to do something, to help, but I just stood there. The soldier came out, dragging the limp form of Father Ivan by the chain of the gold crucifix around his neck. Once our dear priest's body was beside his wife's, the soldier took the gold chain and crucifix from Father Ivan's neck and put it in his own pocket. While the soldier was busy at the front, there was a flash of movement at the back of the priest's house. Roman, my classmate and friend, and now an orphan, had crawled out the back window. He was barefoot, and his black-framed glasses were crooked on his face. I looked around. The other shock workers had run off, and Roman wasn't in anyone's line of sight, except my own. I did a quick motion with one hand, telling him to get going. He sprinted away from the house and hid behind a gravestone in the cemetery beyond the church. "Tear down the church!" shouted Tupolev. "Now!" I stood in outraged silence as soldiers, young pioneers, and other shock workers from the city rushed toward our church. Some used their mallets, while others took out rocks or bottles from their pockets. All of this was clearly pre-planned. They threw and smashed and screamed, breaking the antique windows and pulling off timber and stone. A man in a komsomol uniform leaned a ladder up against the side of the church, and a shock worker, carrying ropes, climbed onto the roof, then shimmied up the cupola and lassoed the cross on top. He threw the other end of the rope down to the ground, where other shock workers grabbed the rope and pulled. The cross toppled loose and fell to the ground. A woman from the city ran up to the front doors of the church, screeching at the top of her lungs. The doors were always left unlocked so people could pray when they wanted to, yet now it appeared that they were locked. The woman kicked and smashed at the doors with a hammer until she made a hole that was big enough for her to crawl through, then pushed the doors open from the inside. She propped one of them open with the ornate silver baptismal font, then went back in to do more damage. Moments later, she emerged, wearing an altar cloth like a scarf and carrying the wooden icon of Saint Sophia and her three daughters, Faith, Hope, and Love. Our church was named after Saint Sophia, and this particular icon, with halos made with flecks of gold, was the most beloved of all. The woman lifted it above her head and threw it down the church steps. As the ancient wood split, I felt like my own heart was bursting. Next, she threw off the altar cloth and stomped on it. As the woman went back inside, I stood there, frozen to my spot. If I were brave, I would have tried to save our Matushka and Father Ivan. If I were brave, I would have gone to the church and tried to stop that woman from doing more damage. But I was a coward.